It is our great privilege to introduce someone who needs no introduction in this room, but we're going to do it anyway. A fighter who never backs down in the face of injustice. An optimist who doesn't just believe in a brighter future, she goes out and she actually builds it. A leader who has shown every young woman and girl in this nation that this country is one of possibility. As the first woman, as the first Black American, as the first South Asian American, she has opened up our mind, our collective imagination of what is possible. And personally, she has shown this Black and South Indian household a type of representation we have never seen before.
And she has spent her entire career opening doors of opportunity and advancing equality for our community and countless others. As District Attorney of San Francisco, she fought to outlaw the gay and trans panic defense. As California's Attorney General, she refused to defend Proposition 8 in court. When the Supreme Court lifted the stay on marriages in California, she got on the phone and immediately ordered the clerk in Los Angeles to begin issuing marriage licenses. And then she came straight to San Francisco City Hall to officiate the first wedding for a same-sex couple in California post-Prop 8. As a member of the United States Senate, she worked closely with us on the Equality Act and so many other critical pieces of legislation. And now, as the Vice President, she has used the power of her office and the power of her platform to defend and advance progress. It's thanks to her we have the most diverse cabinet in United States history. With LGBTQ+ leaders breaking boundaries at every level of government, we have Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson sitting on the Supreme Court. We have a White House that is fighting on behalf of our trans youth in the states, that is fighting for voting rights, that is fighting for abortion access, that is fighting for equality, equity, and liberation. As our Vice President, she is truly showing up for our communities. And through her leadership, she is showing every young woman and girl that they are powerful and that their voice matters. So now, please join us in giving a warm HRC welcome to the Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
HRC! Oh, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Kelly, for your powerful words and your powerful leadership, and for your lifetime of work fighting for civil and human rights. And Becky, thank you. Thank you so very much for all that the two of you together and individually represent. Before I begin today, I will say a few words about the vicious attack on Paul Pelosi. I spoke with Speaker Pelosi yesterday morning, and she intended to be here with all of us. Many of you know of her long-standing leadership and allyship and support of HRC. And so she is a friend. She is a dear friend, she and Paul both. And so I told her that we are all praying for Paul and for their entire family. And it just speaks to so much of what HRC has always stood for, which is the work that we still have to do to fight against hate and to stand up, to say there's no place in America for political violence, and that we will always stand together to combat those who pretend to be powerful but define their power is knocking people down when we understand the true measure of strength is based on who you lift up. So with that, I will say it is so good to be with everyone tonight. So good. Thank you. So I first attended this dinner, the first time I attended, in 1999 with my dear friend, Mark Leno. I was a courtroom prosecutor at the time, and Mark was then one of the first openly gay members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And these many dinners and years later, I am honored to be here at the HRC dinner as Vice President of the United States. Thank you. Thank you. And so I know, and I have a history with this organization and all of the friends who are here, and I know then how for decades the leaders in this room have helped our nation to realize its highest ideals. It is the leaders in this room, and so many before us, who marched and protested, who organized and advocated and ran for office. The people in this room who took action as allies and parents and as your full selves to advance liberty, freedom, and equality for all. For decades, HRC has shown our nation the true meaning of patriotism. And together, the work we have done has also been about building coalitions, because we all know we are strongest when we fight together. That knowledge, of course, guided Sylvia Rivera, Bayard Rustin, Harvey Milk, and my dear friend Jim Rivaldo, who helped elect Harvey Milk to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and who managed my campaign when I first ran for District Attorney of San Francisco. And Rivaldo would often tell stories and recount the earliest days of the gay rights movement, and we spent so much time together. And he would talk about the importance then and the continuing importance of working together. He talked about how the origins of the movement really prioritized bringing folks together from the civil rights movement, the labor movement, and the women's rights movement. He understood and talked so much about the importance of the power of coalitions, and he asked me to promise him in his last days that I would continue to work on what we collectively know is the power of coalition building. Think back to 1986, Winston Johnson, one of the early leaders of HRC. He asked his friend, Coretta Scott King, to speak at one of the first HRC galas. Others might have turned him down, but that great civil rights leader said, "Just tell me where and when," because as Coretta Scott King put it, she said, and I quote, "I know Martin would be with you on this." Coretta Scott King spoke the words that reflect what we all know. The only way we move forward as a nation is together. Together. As has been said in 2004, almost 20 years ago, together we stood in San Francisco City Hall with people of all ages and races and genders and backgrounds when I was so honored to perform some of our country's first marriages of same-sex couples. Together, We gathered again on June 28, 2013, again at San Francisco City Hall, when I pronounced Chris Perry and Sandy Steer spouses for life. And it was truly one of the proudest days of my life. And we stood together in 2020 to deliver leadership for this country that was focused on bringing us together instead of pulling us apart. As always, our work was under difficult circumstances. Then it included, of course, a global pandemic when people had to wait in line for hours to ensure that their voices were heard. But that hard work resulted in the election of Joe Biden and me to the White House. And we, the President and I, are so proud to have led the most pro-equality administration in our nation's history. You'll remember, in fact, that on the very first day we took office, President Biden expanded protections for LGBTQ+ Americans in housing, in healthcare, education, and the workplace. We renewed a commitment to end HIV/AIDS in America by 2030. Based on legislation I was proud to introduce as a senator, we ordered insurance companies to cover the cost of PrEP. And we have fought together to make sure every person can access and afford the care they need. Working together, we are strengthening protection for LGBTQ+ children who live in foster care. We are combating the dangerous and abusive practice of conversion therapy. And we reversed the ban on transgender service members. Because we should honor as a nation all people who are willing to risk their lives to defend our freedom. And we are proud to have appointed leaders from this community and beyond to the highest levels of our administration. Since 2020, we have accomplished all that and so much more. And together we have expanded background checks for gun purchases and, yes, lowered the cost of insulin and prescription drugs and canceled student loan debt for millions of Americans, and made the largest investment, $370 billion, in fighting our climate crisis, largest in our nation's history. And all that HRC to say, because of your work, because of your hard work, over the past 22 months, in addition to the past many decades, we have made historic progress. And so much of that work is because we approached it doing it together. And so together we will continue to fight to move forward. But we must recognize, in this moment in our country, there are powerful forces trying to take us backward. Today, the rights, the freedoms, and the very existence of the LGBTQ+ people are under assault. Children's hospitals have received bomb threats simply because they care for transgender youth. White supremacists have shown up at pride festivals armed with assault weapons. Trans folks, in particular trans women of color, have faced record levels of deadly violence. Every day, LGBTQ+ youth are enduring bullying and harassment. And in states across our nation, extremist, so-called leaders have fanned the flames of hate and homophobia for political gain. These extremists, as we know, have passed Don't Say Gay laws. They want to fire teachers just for having family photographs on their desk. and punish students who speak openly about who they are. You know, as vice president, I received letters from people across our nation. I received one, for example, from a lesbian woman in Washington who was terrified that the Supreme Court will take away her right to marry the person she loves. And another from a young trans man in Colorado who has lost half of his friends to suicide. And one from a gay man in Maryland who fears America is becoming a place where people do not see him as fully human. Well, tonight I have a message, in particular for the young leaders of America. We see you and we hear you, and you are not alone. There are millions of us who stand by your side, and we are in this fight together. You are not alone. And HRC, all of this is happening in a broader context. Our nation right now, and I've said this before and I will keep saying it until we put an end to it, our nation is experiencing an epidemic of hate. In 2020, hate crimes in the United States surged to the highest rate in over a decade. As a former prosecutor, as a former United States Senator, and now as Vice President, I have seen how hate deprives people of their most fundamental freedoms. The freedom to sit in a classroom, go to a movie, or march in a parade without fearing for their life. The freedom to be who you are, to worship how you choose, to love who you love, and the freedom to make choices about your own body. Consider, the United States Supreme Court, the highest court of our land, just took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the people of America, the right to make a decision about their own bodies without government interference. And now, many extremist so-called leaders have called for an abortion ban nationwide. And do note the hypocrisy. These so-called leaders say they care about life while they ignore issues such as maternal mortality. And recall, when Dobbs was decided, these so-called leaders said we should return the issue to the voters. And yet, these same leaders, you got to watch what they're saying in addition to what they're doing. These so-called leaders in states across our country have passed laws making it more difficult for the people to vote. They say the people in the states should vote on the issue, yet they're making it more difficult for the people to vote with undemocratic laws, un-American laws. And this is just the beginning, because Clarence Thomas said the quiet part out loud. Contraception is on the line. Marriage equality is on the line. And just take a look at which states attack voting rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and reproductive rights. And you will not be surprised to know that quite a few do all three at the same time. The point is, all of these attacks on freedom are connected. And to respond to these threats, we must join together and build those coalitions that have been so much a part of our movements. HRC, I believe that when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. So tonight, let us speak with one voice. We stand for the right of all people to live free from discrimination. We stand for the right of all people to participate equally in our society. And that is why we fight to pass the Equality Act, We stand for the right to marry the person you love, and that is why we fight to pass the Respect for Marriage Act. We stand for the right to participate in our democracy, and that is why we fight to pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We stand for the right of every person to have autonomy over their own body, and that is why we will write the protections of Roe v. Wade into law. And so tonight, let us remember the advice of the great hero, Harvey Milk, who said, quote, "Rights are won only by those who make their voices heard." Well, there is an election in 10 days. And I know in 10 days, we will make our voices heard, and we will speak out for freedom. We will speak out for democracy. We will speak out for equality. And as always, we will speak out with pride. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you all.